the role of higher education and music education preparation programs. That's what we're talking about on today's PMEA's Take Note podcast, presented by the Slippery Rock University Music Department. Well, hello, everyone. On today's Take Note podcast, we are joined by Dr. William Behre. He is the president at Slippery Rock University. Been in that role, I believe, since 2018. So kind of interestingly enough, had a touch a little bit of the world before the pandemic and now navigating during the pandemic. Dr. Behre, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I joke that I've been president for 3 semesters in a pandemic.
Yeah, fair enough. We wanted to have you on today to talk about the role of music and music education departments at universities. And, in Pennsylvania, we are so lucky that we have some wonderful music education programs. And one of them being Slippery Rock University that has produced so many wonderful educators throughout the state of Pennsylvania. But I'm curious to talk to you from the perspective of someone who's overseeing a whole university, a lot of degree programs. How do you see the role of a music and music education degree programs within a university?
It's an interesting thing. In my role, you sort of look through things at a variety of lenses. And when you look at the arts in general and music specifically, they bring the richness in life. And so they bring a richness to our community that I don't know that you can put a figure on or put your hand on exactly. But our marching band, for example, is an incredibly lively group, and they bring a texture to everything that they do. And the music performances on our campus bring a sense of culture and belonging on campus. People, gather. It's a gathering spot, and that's been particularly poignant this year as we came back, because what did we come back to? We came back to athletic events and arts events, and those are the things. Those were the gathering points, or have been the gathering points, and I think that in some ways the pandemic has underscored the value of the arts, because I don't know about you, but I spent more time listening to music and things like that while I was isolated, and I think that that's the basic value. There's a notion. I'm gonna misquote it, but there's an old quote that a cynic knows the price of everything but the value of nothing. and if you put on a bean counter hat for a moment and you actually look. Music programs are not revenue generating in general. So they're programs that our other programs sustain, but we do it for a reason, because there's a richness to music that's important. I've had the misfortune, honestly, of working on a campus at one point that phased out virtually all of its music education, and there was something missing. There was a hollowness to it, and I tried to bring it back, but because music programs tend to cost more than they generate, it's very hard to start one now. In the current economic environment, it's very hard to say, okay, we're going to deliberately take a loss in this area. Fortunately, Slippery Rock has a great history, and we're willing to absorb the cost because of all the important things that music brings to our campus.
And I think that speaks a lot to the role of folks like you, who are in that position of, a very difficult position of what are the priorities for our campus? What are the priorities for our university? So I'm just curious if you could speak a little to that from that perspective of, maybe, what's the message to another university president out there who is grappling with this, where you say, okay, looking at holistically at our campus, we understand the value of this. And when it comes down to the point of money, here's why we realize the value.
I would say to anyone who's trying to figure this out that that you need to balance it within your context. If I'm going to be blunt, Slippery Rock couldn't afford another 1,000 music majors. We just couldn't afford it because the nature of one-on-one instruction and the type of instruction, it's some of the most expensive instruction you can do. So if the music department said they wanted to double in size, triple in size, I'd have to say no, because we just couldn't absorb that. But we know that a music program in its current structure and size, we can absorb, given the other programs we have, some of which are more revenue generating, and we balance that. Fortunately, we don't have a profit motive. We ours is a motive to do good things for society, and so we know that producing musicians, music educators, and music therapists is good for society. So we do it proportionally where we can. So I would say to another president, if that president was facing significant budget issues, I would urge them not to remove their music program. I would urge them to scale their music program to fit the needs of their institution. If they had to get a little bit smaller, then you get a little bit smaller. You become a little bit more boutique-y. But you just can't lose. In my opinion, you can't be a university and lose the fine arts. Just as I don't believe you can be a true university and lose the liberal arts, even though there's a lot of pressure in current society for more career-oriented or directly career-oriented. I have an undergraduate degree from a liberal arts institution, so I understand that the liberal arts are career-oriented when you're talking about reasoning skills, numeracy skills, data analysis skills, and thinking skills. But I think some folks lose that because they look for the direct straight line between their degree and a job. And fortunately in music, you have a little bit more of that direct line. So that level of cynicism, you lose a little bit because people understand what a musician is. So I think you've got that benefit. But you'll always have folks who say, if it's not making money, then why does a university do it? And I almost don't have an answer for that because it's anathema to what I think a university is. We're a non-for-profit, so our job is to help benefit society. And I would argue very strongly and vehemently that producing musicians, music educators, music therapists is a net benefit to society, and that's what we're here for.
And I think, but before we move on from that point, you really walk the walk here because, you hang out with the marching band at the football game, you'll sit there with them. So, you're not just saying this, you truly are part of the campus community and are part of that value system.
Well, to watch the relationship between the marching band at a football game and the audience at a football game, and even the team, it's no coincidence that the team runs over to the band right after the game. It's actually quite touching. And they mean that. It's not just performative. They understand the value. Something interesting happened this year. We moved the marching band out of the stands to a spot in one of the end zones. And I did it for COVID reasons. The goal was to spread people out in the stands. It ended up, I think, because there was so much pent up desire to be in social environments, we ended up filling the stands anyway. So to be blunt, the COVID thing went out the window. And by the end of the season, though, we realized that we lost something in shifting the proximity from the student section to the band. And I can't predict anything that's going to happen next year. I find that this virus makes me humble every time I turn around. But all else being equal, I think we'll move the band back to the stands because I do think we lost a little bit of that social interaction and a little bit of the camaraderie that the band built. But yeah, I spend time with the band as much as I spend time on the sideline with the team because the band is an important element of those days. And if you've ever been to a Slippery Rock football game, it feels like a traditional small college feel, and there's a real sense of community, and the band is central to that.
Yeah, and that's so important, and I think I really appreciate that you think about and that's part of your thinking. So let me pull out a little bit here. And, if we read the headlines and we pay attention to what's going on, we know that the state system of higher education is going through some changes. And with these consolidations, Slippery Rock not included in the consolidations, but I would imagine that that is in your thinking of, how do we plan ahead? Because while the state system is, you're all sister institutions, there's still some, maybe competition isn't the right word, but a student has choice of where to go. And looking as, say, someone who wants to go into music education, the options are not there what there were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Slippery Rock still maintains, on the western half of the state, one of the larger state system programs. But looking kind of holistically at how you think about, okay, how do we position ourselves now with the changing face of the system, with the consolidation? How do you think about what you do when you have private institutions as well that are trying to capitalize on what's changing? I mean, if you just look at advertising, you see about that. I'm just curious for your perspective moving forward as we're all going to live through this change. What does that mean for Slippery Rock?
I think none of us know exactly. I think it's a work in progress. I will tell you, pre-pandemic, one of the things that colleges and universities look at, we call it our admissions overlap or cross-apps, and that is, where does a Slippery Rock applicant apply? What other schools are they applying to? And there's been a gradual but substantial evolution with Slippery Rock, shifting away from cross applications with other PASHE schools and more cross applications with the Pittsburgh schools, the Pitts, the Duquesnes, Robert Morris's, things like that. So we've been living with that competition, if you will, with the privates well before this integration, and it's just been an interesting phenomenon. We don't IUP and Slippery Rock have some substantial cross apps, but we don't really have massive cross apps with the other PASHE schools. So yes, there's some competition, but it's not nearly as direct as you would think it would be, or even I thought it was when I first arrived. But back to the bigger question about sort of how is this all going to shake out? And again, I don't think any of us know exactly. Every school, including the non-integrating schools, are looking at our program arrays, and that's as simple as looking at all the majors you have and trying to figure out, are they the right ones? Do you have majors that have fallen out of favor? And Slippery Rock, for example, has just over 50 undergraduate majors, but 75% of our students are actually in the top 17 or 18 of those majors. So as you're looking, you particularly look at the ones where the 75% aren't, and you start asking some questions. Does that make sense? Does that make sense for future investment? And from a student interest standpoint, music is doing just fine. So that's not an interest. That's not an issue. Students want our music programs, so that suggests to us that we're providing the sort of education, our reputation is strong enough that we should sustain them, and we will. So again, the question becomes, for music education, is what's the right size of the program? Should we be trying to grow it? Should we not? Some of our private school competitors have an awful lot more endowment and grant money. And what that does, and where I feel for our faculty, is we don't have an awful lot of scholarship money to give to a particularly talented student and say, you're the best bassoonist in the West, you need to come to Slippery Rock. Some of our privates have endowments that they can offer them a free ride. We honestly can't, in general. We really can't. And that's where the economics comes in. If I know that even a full pay student, the university is losing money on, a full pay student comes to Slippery Rock to study music, we will lose money on that student because of the nature of the pedagogy. And I have no issue with that. I want to be really clear. I have no issue with the fact, but there's only a certain amount of scholarship you can do on top of that. If it's endowed scholarship, it's one thing. 2 seconds of how financial aid works, there are basically two piles of money, actually three. There's state and federal aid in one pile. There's money from our foundation where someone, say, would endow a music scholarship and the money comes from the foundation. Then the rest comes from our operating budget. So if there's foundation money, that's fantastic because that's just additive and it's wonderful. We just can't afford an exorbitant amount of money from our operating budget to scholarship students who we know were already not going to be able to recoup the cost of their education. And I know our music faculty are frustrated by that, and I understand it, which is why one of the things we'll be doing in our upcoming capital campaign is trying to get more funding for art scholarships in endowment so that we can get more money, but it comes from our donors and not from our operating.
Well, I mean, I have to say, I appreciate the honesty and candor there, because you agree that here's what it should be, and then to hear you back it up and say we're going to try to solve that is reassuring, I would say, and it's honest, as opposed to just saying giving some company line. You're really saying we're going to make this happen.
And the good news is we have enough students to have a high quality program without those massive scholarships. I had a faculty member come to me at one point though with a very talented student and say, this student is considering transferring to a local private because they're able to offer the student an awful lot more scholarship because she was very talented. And I had to say in good conscience, well, then you probably should encourage the student to transfer if the cost is a big issue, because we just can't match it. And it's heartbreaking to lose a talented student. It's heartbreaking to lose a talented student in any field. And I get that completely. But our solution has to be that private money, because I'm sure that private school was doing it from donor money. Because we're a state institution, and because there was a point in our history where a substantial amount of our revenue and our costs were covered by the state, we never developed that cultural philanthropy, because it's really, when someone my age was coming to college at a place like Slippery Rock, roughly 80% of the education was covered by the state. Today it's 25%. So we were actually being forced to function more like a private institution in terms of trying to raise donor money, but we don't have the 100-year history of raising donor money. So we're playing catch up right now. And that's just, in all honesty, where we are. We need to get there, because I don't see state funding. I mean, I hope it increases. I know the chancellor's asked for a lot of money, and I hope he gets it. But this is one where to quote the old movie, show me the money, because I just, until I see it, I'm not sure I'll believe it.
Yeah. Let me talk about get your thoughts on another kind of 30,000 foot level thing. So when it comes to the past few years, we've talked a lot about the teacher pipeline, and I'm not just talking about music education, I'm talking about any area, and then increasing diversity in the teacher pipeline. I always look at it as it's a circle. So the more students we get who are interested in becoming educators, then go to higher ed, and then we'll get them back into the K-12 classroom, and then hopefully they inspire more teachers. That works, for just in getting more folks into education, but also the piece of getting a more diverse workforce into education. And sometimes I think it's very complicated to figure out, if we want to affect change in that circle, where do we enter the circle to help make the change? And the answer is probably everywhere. But then the question is how. I'm just curious from your perspective in higher ed, looking at that and saying, okay, how do we get more folks into education? How do we get more diversity in education? What is the role of higher ed? I know that's kind of this nebulous large question, but I'm curious for your thoughts on that.
I think there are a couple of on-ramps, particularly when you're talking about issues of diversity in teacher preparation. First is you have to work on your curriculum on your campus to reflect a more diverse population. At my first faculty meeting here, I asked our faculty a very blunt question. If I were an African-American male, where would I see myself in our curriculum? And it's been a challenge that we've been working on since then. We've actually added some diversity coursework and some diversity requirements. But I do think you like anything else, if you really want to understand what a college or a university values, you look at two places. You look at its curriculum, you look at its budget. Everything else is lip service. But what we do, what we fund and what we teach is what we value. And so I do think our faculty are committed to building meaningful diversity into our curriculum, and I see that as happening. But for teacher prep, I think there's another piece to it, and that is doing outreaches to high schools, particularly high schools where you have a more broadly diverse population, and trying to develop those relationships then, especially at a place like Slippery Rock. We're in a very homogeneous area. We don't, I'll say, naturally attract a lot of people of color. I think we have to actually make the case to people of color, you want to be here. And I'll give you an example. We did an outreach this year with a group of high school students from Newcastle. We brought them onto campus to discuss this very issue. And I know one of our faculty is planning a summer leadership program with them. So it's building that relationship before the application process. If you just wait and hope to get lucky, if you will, in applications, you're leaving too much to chance. And if you're a place like Slippery Rock, demographically, the local demographics are not in your favor.
Got it. Well, I'm sure we could talk about that subject for a lot longer, but I appreciate your thoughts on kind of the bigger picture things. But I really appreciate your support of music and music education, and you taking some time to give us a little more understanding of your thought process today. Much appreciated.
It's my pleasure.
So Dr. William Behre, the president of Slippery Rock University, again, thank you for joining us, and thank you all for joining us on today's PMEA's Take Note podcast presented by the Slippery Rock University Music Department. We will see you next time.